The ambulance is there for Mrs. Hendler.
The what?
An ambulance and a fire truck came for Mrs. Hendler.
Hey.
So I met Leiby in shul just now here. He came with his children to office upon him, and he said everything's under control. But they're there. Yeah. Okay, so I guess whatever it is, he didn't need to be there. Okay, so let's just quickly review what we learned on Friday, because there was a lot of stuff going on. So the first thing that we learned on Friday was a machlokes. If someone is cherry picking and he only picks one of the components of Naziris, is that no Kabbalah at all, or is it a full Kabbalah? Rabbi Shimon held it was no Kabbalah at all. Our Mishnah and the Chum said that it was a full Kabbalah, and the whole machlokes hinged on which pasuk you focus on. The pasuk Mikol Asher Yeyaseh tells you that unless you are makabel everything, you have nothing. That would be the sheet of Rabbi Shimon, and the sheet of the Chum is because it says in the pasuk Miyayin v'Sheicher, meaning, or we learn from there that even if you only pick one of them, it's a full Naziris. That was the basis of the machlokes. But that spun off into a whole series of new halachas, because whenever you have two Amoraim or Tanoim referring to different psukim, now everybody has to explain what they do with the other guy's pasuk. So because of that, we were fortunate to be able to yield so many more halachas out of it. One halacha that we learned was to aser yain mitzvah ki yain rishos. A nazir who is mushba v'oimet to drink wine, his naziris will trump the chiyuv to eat, drink wine, or if he made a shvu not to drink wine, we'll say isser chal al isser, the naziris will be chal on the isser to drink wine. That's one halacha we learned. Another halacha we learned was that kohanim cannot drink wine when they go into the Beis Hamikdash. Is that only wine products of a grape, or is it any intoxicating beverage? There was a machlokes about that too. Rav Shimon learned from Miyayin v'Sheicher that only intoxicating beverages that are derivatives of grapes are also, but a kohen would be able to drink other intoxicating beverages. The Chachamim argue any intoxicating beverage cannot be drank by a kohen before he goes into the Beis Hamikdash. Then there was another halacha that we learned as an outgrowth of these psukim. Mikol Asher Yeyaseh teaches us, according to the Chachamim, that if you have different types of things that are osir, for instance, grapes, maybe some wine, maybe some seeds, they all are mitzayef to the shear. Rabbi Shimon knows you don't need siruf because there is no shear, right? Even eating a tiny bit of the isser gets you malchus. And Rabbi Shimon Shita is that all over the Torah. A drop of chaylev gets you malchus. The only reason why there's a shear kazayis for chaylev is that if you ate kazayis b'shoigig, you bring a korban. But for malchus, you automatically get even with the smallest shear. All of the shiurim only are relevant to other things, not to malchus. So that's the first set of halachas we learned yesterday. Then we learned about Nazir Shimshon. In order to be makabel Nazir Shimshon, you have to be pretty specific. Saying Shimshon alone doesn't work. Even Anim ben Menoach doesn't work. Only if you have three things, Shimshon ben Menoach and Baal Delila, then it'll work. But there were other terms that you could use that would be clear enough that you want Nazir Shimshon. Then the Mishnah introduced something called Naziris Olam, forever Naziris. And the Mishnah was telling us the differences between Nazir Shimshon, which is pretty much forever, and Nazir Olam. The Mishnah gave us two distinctions. Number one is that a Nazir Olam, from time to time, can trim his hair, lighten up his hair load, and we're going to see today how often that is. The second halacha is a Nazir Olam is not allowed to become tamei, and if he becomes tamei, he has to bring a korban. While Nazir Shimshon is allowed to become tamei. Although the Mishnah doesn't say he's allowed to become tamei, the Mishnah just says that if he becomes tamei, he doesn't bring a korban. We said that the Nazir Olam who could lighten up his hair from time to time, we learned that there's a halacha l'Moshe Sinai that he has to bring 3 karbonas when he does that. Each time he is lightening up his load. We also discussed this halacha of being mitama, and the Gemara proved, in fact, that our mission doesn't just say that he's not mechuyev a korban if he becomes tamei. He's actually allowed to become tamei because there was a machlokes between Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda that we quoted whether or not Nazir Shimshon is a davar hanodar or if it's a davar ha'aser. If you hold that it's a davar ha'aser, meaning Shimshon wasn't Mekabel Naziris, there was a series of Isurim upon him, then you can't say Harei Nazir Shimshon. That's like saying Harei Kikar Ze Asar Lai Ke Nevela. That doesn't work for another, right? When it comes to another, you have to be matvis and a dover another. You can take Kikar Ze like a carbon because you made a carbon, but you can Nazir Shimshon you cannot make. That's the shita of Reb Shimon. Rabbi Yehuda holds that it is a Naziris, but it's a mutter l'tamei l'meisim. Then the Gemara brought another shaila about being matris in a dover another by a bechor. We know a bechor is kadosh merechem. As soon as it's born, it's kadosh. Is that something you could be matris in? We had a machlokes between Rabbi Yaakov and Rabbi Yosy. Rabbi Yaakov said you could still be matris in it. It's a dover ha'aser. There it is, because when it says kiyida neder, it sticks in the extra word lashem. From the extra word lashem, we learned that you could even be matvis in bechor, even though bechor becomes kadosh by itself. And Rabbi Yaakov said because there's a mitzvah to declare it as a bechor, even though it would become a bechor anyway. While Rabbi Yossi said no such thing. A bechor is a davar ha'aser, not a davar ha'nader, and therefore, if you were matvis in the bechor, it would not be a nether. And that took us to where we are up to now, which is that Nazir Shimshon, we said he's allowed to become Tamid. So we are about 11 or 12 lines from the bottom on Daf Dalet Amud Beis, right? And then we got into the pasuk of Lashem that it says by Naziris, which prompted us to a beautiful story of Shimon HaTzadik of what's called the ultimate Nazir. The ultimate Nazir is someone who does it completely Lashem Shemayim. Okay, beautiful. So now we are up to Shimshon Lav Nadir. Are you telling me that Shimshon, no one ever was Mekabel this Naziris? It was just an Isser from the Torah? That cannot be. Vaksiv, it says in the pasuk, and let's read the pasuk together, and you tell me what you think of this pasuk. It says in the pasuk, Ki hina chara v'yaladet bein u'moyer loyala roshai kinazir lekim yanar min habotin v'yachal lo'shiyas Yisrael miyat plishtim. Now, what does that sound like to you? That there was a Kabbalah's Naziris or there wasn't a Kabbalah's Naziris? There was. Who's talking in this pasuk? No, who's talking over here? You know who's talking in this pasuk? The Malach is talking. The Malach that came to them is talking. So where do you see over here anything about anyone being Makabal Naziris? The Malach was declaring it. So there's two pshatim here. How do you understand this? What the Gemara's Rai is? So the Mefarish says, the Kasol Kadaitach, the Manoyach Kamal Hamilsa. The Gemara thought that Manoyach, I guess, interjected in here, and the Malach was in the middle of speaking, but Manoyach interjected and he said it. Davadavar another. Shimshon didn't make another. So that the Mefarish shows the other mother as Benoy Benazir. A person has the ability to make his son into a Nazir. Well, he would have to say Hashem Nazir. The word that he would have to use. Those words
Hey, did he just walk out on us?
I just didn't think you want to see my fingernails that are all messed up. This is much prettier. I'm going to give you the finger. It's going to be a silver one. Okay. So I would assume that the lashon was ki nazir alakim yanar. So could be when the Malach said ki nachor bilat bein and more lay Manoach said, do you mean ki nazir alakim? Is that what you're saying? Right? So that's the shot of the Mefarish. Tosfos actually says it a little differently. Tosfos says, "V'achsev ki nazir lakimiyah v'kasol kadaitach shahamalach hayomer lo'aviv shiazirenu l'chashayoyle." Of course, it's the Malach speaking, but the Malach was instructing Manoach to put Naziris on his child when the child would be born. In fact, you could be mother your son with a Nazir. And for the Gemara, that's not a raya, because Hasa Malachu de Kamerle, Binavua, the Malach was telling him that. There was never a Kabbalah Naziris, Velayatza Naziris, Loimi Pi Aviv, Loimi Pi Shimshon. Never at any point did the word Naziris or Kabbalah Naziris come out of anyone's mouth. So Ibazoi, once again, you see that there was no nether on this Naziris. It was an automatic Naziris. And that's why we have this Shiloh, the Machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, if you could be matfas in such type of Naziris, do we consider the davar another or not? Okay, so we've got there. Now we have to have another question. We know our Mishnah told us that the Nazir Shimshon could become Tamei. We know on Ditmel Mason. How do you know that Shimshon was allowed to be Matame himself with Mason? It's if you're going to say it because it says in the pasuk. Shimshon said, "V'lechi achamor," with the jawbone of an ass. Hikisi elef ish. I killed 1,000 people. So if he killed all those people, he must have become Tamei. The Mefarish touches it as mechatech chatach. He slashed them with it, but he didn't directly touch these people. Tozus learns lashon chita, maybe he threw it at them. So you don't have a raya from this statement that Shimshon was metam himself. When I was in yeshiva in Philadelphia, we used to buy our airline tickets from a travel agent that was across the street from yeshiva, and on their wall they had two prominent signs. This goes back 40 years, but I remember it like yesterday. One sign said, "Please don't confuse lack of planning on your part as an emergency on our part." That was one sign. The other sign said, "Samson killed 1,000 Philistines with the jawbone of an ass." Every day, thousands of business deals are killed with the same weapon. This is a sign I saw. Now I remember. This is what I remember from 40 years ago. I don't think I remember any of Rebel Yeshurim, but this I remember. Episode of Bechilent in Philadelphia. Zok the Gemara Ela Mehachal. So maybe we could bring a raya from the following pasuk that Shimshon was able to be metamer. It says V'yach mehem shloishimish. He killed 30 Pelishtim. V'yikach es chalitzoisam. He took their begodim. So obviously he had to touch them to take off their begodim. In fact, the Gemara, who said Dilma ashlechinon bereisha. Maybe first he took off their clothing, and then he killed them. Zok the Gemara, it's in the same pasuk. You don't say ein muktim in the same pasuk. In the same pasuk, it first says vayach, then it says vayikach. So he hit them first. In fact, the Gemara, yeah, but who said they were dead when he took off their begodim? V'dilma goyshim shavinu. Maybe he made them into goyshim. So how do we know, in fact, that Shimshon was matama? And the Gemara Gemirla, we have a Kabbalah that Shimshon took their clothing off after they were dead, so he definitely came into contact with dead bodies.
I know a case where there's a mukta mucher in the same pasuk.
Ein mukta mucher?
Yeah, in mukta in the same pasuk. Usually you learn smichas out of it. Why is this parsha next to this parsha?
Right.
The pasuk is, and we just learned it a few weeks ago. It's in when Hashem tells Moshe to go to Mitzrayim and do what he told him to do. So he takes his wife and his children and his son, and he puts it on the chamor, and he goes to Mitzrayim, and then he takes his mata. And Rashi says, "Ein muktim."
Vayikach Moshe zishta b'sbanav vayakivim al chamor vayoshav at Mitzrayim vayikach Moshe mata l'kim b'yadoi. Zokt Rashi pasuk al chamor hamiyuchad l'chamor shchav Avram vayoshav at Mitzrayim vayikach mata ein muktim b'mucher meduktikim b'michra. Wow, that's very impressive. It's in the name Chaim, like it's Chaim Kanevsky, Chaim Zolti, the guy that it's on. So even in the same pasuk.
Yeah, so yeah, it's written about that a
So
little.
lokach esamata b'midyan v'halve lichtem tchila. Gewaltig. Wow. Now this week is a Reb Chaim Kanevsky week because of the famous story where they asked Reb Chaim Kanevsky how many times it says Moshe in the Torah, and he whatever he said, they said you're missing two places. He says, yeah, v'mimet habayis mihiyos miseh, which is in this week's parsha, and Shemoid kol bal masha yodei in the parsha of Shemitah. Both of them, the computer didn't know that the computer didn't see the nekudas. Chaim Kanevsky knew it. Okay, gewaltig. Okay, so let's see the Heilige Gemara weiter. I'm sorry, we have to see the Ran because the Ran asks a very important question. I'm sorry, Tosfos. V'dilma goyses in shavinu. Lav dafka goysesin. It can't literally mean that they were goysesin, and that's why he was able to touch them. Ki Nazir also liga begoises. A Nazir is not allowed to touch a goises. Ela kloimer karev legoises. They were very, very ill. Not their chance of survival, their prognosis was not very good. And there's a whole shiloh we're going to see later. A goises b'di adam, a goises b'di shemayim. Could be a goises b'di adam. You could make an assessment. A goises b'di shemayim. You can't. Ela gemara. So I thought before I saw Toshis, we have a Kabbalah that Shimshon was able to be Metama. But that's not what the Kabbalah is. The Kabbalah is Pirish de Gamrinon de Ketlinu Mamish V'adu Shlucha Shalchinon. We have a Kabbalah of the order of how he did it. He killed them first, then he took the begotten. It's interesting that you have a Kabbalah of Zach, and then from there we learn that he became Tamei. Fregt Toshis, a goy becomes Tamei. Vafilu l'manda Omer Kivrei Oivdek Ichavim Einon Metamin Ba'oyel. Even if you hold Kivrei Oivdek Omer not Metamin Ba'oyel, B'maga mi Metamin. If you touch a goy, a dead body, you do become Tamei. So therefore we have a raya that Shimshon was not prohibited from becoming Tamei. The Nazir Olam, we learned that a Nazir Olam could trim his hair from time to time. Where do we know that a Nazir Olam is allowed to trim his hair? The Tanya we learned. Rabbi Omer. We're learning from Avshalom, and there's a whole shaila how often the lightening of the hair happened. But let's see what it says there. It says Rabbi Omer Avshalom Nazir Olam Hayat. Avshalom was a Nazir Olam. Shenemer. How do we know this? Because it says He Mikates Arboim Shana. 40 years from what the Gemara is going to ask soon. Vayomer Avshalom El HaMelech. Avshalom told his father David HaMelech, El Chana, I want to go. V'Ashalem is Nadarai, I want to pay my Nadarim. Asher Nadarti LaHashem, that I was noted to Hashem b'chevron. So where do you see anything about Naziris in this pasuk? How do you see from here that Avshalom was a Nazir Olam? So Zok Toises, Ustam Neder Mashmulay Naziris. Stam Neder is Naziris. So if Avshalom said, I got to pay my Neder, it means Naziris. Why? Why should Stam Neder mean Naziris? So we're going to get there in a second. Since the pasuk says later on that he only used to take haircuts from time to time, it's mashma that he had a long hair. Michlal the Naziris neder. It's a raya that there was Naziris, so that's another reason that will support that this neder was Naziris. But I saw the Masifta brings down, I don't remember who he brings it down from, he brings down that we know that it's inappropriate to make a neder. As a matter of fact, we had a Mishnah in the Durham that said if someone said Kenidrus Rishoyim, that's a good neder. But if someone said Kenidrus Tzadikim, it's not a good neder because Tzadikim don't make a neder. So Avshalom is not going to go to his father all proud, I'm going to take care of my neder. He's not going to advertise, I'm doing an avla. The only thing that's appropriate is Naziris. Naziris, when it's required, as we saw by the story of Shimon Tzadik, Naziris could be required. And we know Naziris is a good antidote for Gaiva, right? Because that's what Shimon Tzadik was so happy of, this fellow who was this good. So Avshalom probably had a good dose of Gaiva anyway. So he was Makabel Naziris, and that's the only thing that it makes sense. The neder that Avshalom was referring to. And he takes a haircut once every 12 months. Shenemar, how do you know that? Because it says regarding Avshalom, Vahi mikates yamim liyamim. So let's look at the pasuk. He brings it down here very nicely. Uve gulchay es roishay, when he would trim his hair, Vahi mikates yamim liyamim, from time to time. Asher yigalech waki covered Allah, because it was very heavy, his hair. The gilchay, and he would trim his hair. And look how much his hair weighed. The shakal es sar shari masai mishkal bevin amelech. So I said over that that's why I lose weight every time I take a haircut. Mati says he doesn't. I'm not sure why. Okay, gewaltig. This is gewaltig. So we know that he took haircuts from time to time, but we don't know this timing of a year. Where did he get a year from? The yalif yamim mibate arechayim. There's a rule that if you sell a home that's in a city that's surrounded with a wall, you have 1 year to redeem it. If you don't redeem it within the year, the buyer gets to keep it forever. As a matter of fact, we learned Gemaras where usually the last month, the buyer would cancel his cell service, cancel his landline, disconnect his email, fly off to a faraway land where he would be impossible to reach so that the fellow won't be able to buy back, right? So they made it a kind because of that you could just deposit it your money in Besdin like putting it into escrow, and that would be enough to salvage your home. So by Batar Chaima, it says in the pasuk also Yomim. If we look at the pasuk quoted here, it says, let's see if I can find it over here. The ish ki yimkar base Moshe Irchaima, Lasai atoim shnas mimkar, right? He could redeem it until the end of the year in which he sold it. And then it says Yomim, focus on this Yomim, Tehegu Lasai. Yomim is the word that we're using to learn from the story of Avshalom. And then it's Lo Yigal Ad Melois Leishana Tamima, then the Kama Bayis Asher Ba'ir Asher Lo Chaima Latzmisus Lakaina Isai. Then it's permanently going to belong to the purchaser, the Deiraisai Lo Yete Bayoiva. So let's have a look over here. Zokt Gemara, it says Yomim regarding the frequency of Avshalom's haircuts. It says Yomim by Batay Arechaima. Ma Hasam Yud Beis Chodesh, Afkan Yud Beis Chodesh. So let me ask you a question. When someone is an Abel Rachman Lutzlan, he's an Abel for 12 months. During an Ibayar, is he an Abel for 12 months or is he an Abel until next year, same time? It's only 12 months. So if there's an Ibayar, you're only an Abel, you count 12 months. It's not year to year. Right? So what is the halacha about Naziris? How often would you be able to lighten your hair? Would you say every 12 months, or if it's an Ibayar, it would be 13 months? So before you answer the question, let's look at where you learn 12 months from. You learn 12 months from Batei Arei Chaima. Batei Arei Chaima, if there's an Ibayar, you actually have 13 months to be able to redeem your house. So if you have 13 months to be able to redeem your house, what would be the halacha by a Nazir Olam lightening up his hair? Would it be like the Yomim of Batei Arei Chaima, which is where you learn it from, and that would give him 13 months, or would it be 12 months? So I want to put that shaila out there just for us to think about, and let's see if we can see an answer, a raya to this shaila from our Gemara. Zok Gemara Baiter. Rabbi Nehurai says it's not once in 12 months. He was a Nazir Olam, he was not a Nazir Shimshon. A Nazir Shimshon is never allowed to cut his hair. No, we changed subjects. We changed subjects when we had the Nazir Olam Heichak Siv. The fourth line from the bottom changes subjects. So Rabbi Nehurai Omer Megaleach Achas L'Shloishim Yom. He could take a haircut every 30 days. And Rabbi Yosy Omer Megaleach Me'erev Shabbos L'Erev Shabbos. He's a Nazir. He could take a haircut once a week. Why? Shekein Matzinu B'vnei Malachim. We find that the princes Shemegalchim Me'erev Shabbos L'Erev Shabbos. So now the Gemara is going to drill down to understand better these three opinions. My time with the Rebbe. What's the svara of Rebbe? Yalef mi Batei Arei Chaima. He has a Gzera Shava Yomim from Batei Arei Chaima. Frank the Gemara, Rebbe himself in the parsha of Batei Arei Chaima learns by Rebbe Huda Amar ein Yomim pach pchusim mishnayim. He darshans Yomim over there as meaning 2 days. And Tosfos tells us, what are these 2 days related to? The Darish miyamim tiyah gulasoi sheina moicha yochel ligal b'pachas b'shnei yomim. He has to let the purchaser keep the house for at least 2 days, and only after 2 days can he redeem the karka, not the karka, the home. Hakanami the bechol beis yomim yikal sarai. Why do you make Gzera Shava yomim and learn the year, which is a different word in the pasuk? Look at the actual word yomim. The way Rebbe learns the actual word yomim, it actually means 2 days. Zok to Gemara. Hi Gzera Shava mishum kovid gomer. Why are we learning this Gzera Shava? Because we want to find a hair that grows too long. We want to find a way for him to be able to trim it. Uv'shnei yomim like a kovid. In 2 days you can't catch COVID. In 2 days there's no COVID. So for sure it can't mean that. Unless it grows fast, but for sure not in 2 days. So, I'm sorry. Yeah. So the Rashash says, the Gemara says that it's all about COVID. Therefore, it shouldn't make sense to say that although you learn it from the Gzera Shava from Batei Arei Chaima, even though the Batei Arei Chaima did a sheet to hold that in the Ibayar is 13 months, but since it's all about COVID, then it should be a fixed amount, and it makes sense it's always 12 months. And the same way we don't learn Yomim directly because Al Kovid, it tells us that the Gzer Shava is not for 2 days. Huadin, Al Kovid, the Gzer Shava will tell us that it doesn't make sense that in the Yibur Yor you would have 13 months. Avada, he could still cut his hair every 12 months. In fact, the Gemara, who says that you shall learn Gzer Shava from Yomim to Yomim of Batei or Echaima? Why don't you learn it up from Yomim where it means 2 years? And that's talking about Yosef and the dream of Pirate. And for the Gemara, done in Yomim she'eni moim shanim, b'Yomim she'eni moim shanim, v'ayichiach zeh she'yeshi moim shanim. If we're learning Gzer Shava, we try to find the most similar place with these words. Therefore, the Yomim of Batei Rechaima is more similar. So someone brought up today, we know you cannot don Gzer Shava unless you heard it from your Rebbe. You don't make it up. So what's going on over here? Well, what was his Kabbalah? Was it from here or was it from there? So it must be, and please correct me if you have a better idea, it must be that there was a Kabbalah of Gzer Shava, but it seems like it wasn't clearly defined. They gave you the 2 words, but you have to go find the words, like a word search. They gave you the word that it's connected to, but you have to find the right word. Oh, Gavaltik, somebody asked that today. Why don't we learn it out of Rivka, where it says Yamim Mayoser, right? So over there, the Yamim means a year. There we learned what the Yamim means a year. I'm sorry? Right. So Dr. Gemara. Yeah, there means 1 year. So somebody asked, like, why didn't I learn it from here instead of from here? Maybe it means 30 days, because you find a place where it says which is when they got the birds, the meat in the midbar. Dr. Gemara again. We want to be similar. How about from Yomim Yomima? I'm sorry? Which parsha? We had it in this parsha, but this is not the Yom Yom that we're talking about. Here we're talking about Shaitim. Let's see what it says over here. What number is it? Dalet. So let me see where it says by Dalet over here. Miyamim Yamima Telechne B'nai Yisrael Lesanos Levas Yiftach Hagaladi. Yiftach made a neder. Whoever comes out of my house, whatever comes out of my household first, is going to be Kodesh Hashem. And who came out? His daughter came out. So he didn't know what to do with her. So he ended up locking her up. She was isolated. And Yomim Yamima, from time to time, people would come to cry with her. How often? Arboas Yomim Bashana. 4 times a year. So if you knew that someone comes 4 times a year, what would you say the frequency is? 3 months. Dr. Gemara, done in Yomim Miyamim, then done in Yomim Miyamima. See, this is what happened. He said something that he shouldn't have said. So I heard a congressman say, an older congressman, that when I was first elected as a congressman, a rich friend of mine invited me to his home one night. And in his office, he had a beautiful mounted, like 5-foot swordfish that was like 70 pounds that he caught. And he had a taxidermist mounted for him. And he says, I want you to know, you're a politician, I want you to know something. This fish, had he kept his mouth shut, he'd still be alive. Sag to Gemara weiter. Done in Yamim Yamim, they done in Yamim Yamima. Fact Gemara, umay nafkamina. Who said you have to be so particular when you're comparing words in Gzer Shava? But Tana the Ber Bishmael, the Shava Koinu Ba'Koin, Zui Shiva Zui Bia. When the Torah talks about the Nige Batim, the way it works is a person goes to a Kohen, he says, Kin Nega Nerli Babayis, I think I got a problem. The Kohen comes, and the first thing he does is he locks up the house for 7 days. And after 7 days, if it doesn't grow, they lock it up again. Now, after the second set of days, if it doesn't grow again, what do you do? So we learn the same process that the Torah tells us that he does after the first 7 days, he does after the second 7 days. And what is that process? He takes out the infected stones, he replaces them, and he replasters. So we learn from V'shava Kohen U'Ba Kohen, one's referring to when the Kohen returns after the first 7 days, one's when he returns after the second 7 days, that we follow the same process. But there it's not exactly the same word. It means the same thing, but it's not the same word. So you see, when it comes to Gzer Shava, you don't have to be so particular that the word should match exactly. So what's wrong with learning it from a Yomim Yamima? So tomorrow, hanimi lihecha the leka de damile. Sure, if you cannot find a way to dan the Gzer Shava, you never told you the Gzer Shava, but you couldn't find the exact words. You know there's a Gzer Shava, so you have to find the most similar words. If you have a perfect match with Bate Arechaima, mididamile yafina. That's one shot why you don't learn it out of Niyam Yamima. But there's another reason, Dr. Gemara, why you couldn't learn it out of Niyam Yamima. Ikadamri, I asked you, it says 4 times a year, so what's the frequency? You said without skipping a beat every 3 months. Correct, Gemara, who said? How do you know that it was once every 3 months? Maybe it was an unusual type of frequency. Dilma arba zimni b'shata, arba yarchin chad zimna, tren yarchin b'chad zimna. Maybe twice a year it was 4 and 4, and then 1 and 1. So maybe the intervals were 4 months, 1 month, 4 months, 1 month. So I'm sorry, 4 months, 2 months, 4 months, 2 months. I apologize. So you don't, 4 times a year does not necessarily mean every quarter. So therefore, we don't have a raya. We can't bring a raya from a place where it's not even clear what it's saying, as the Taisha says. Rabbi Neroy Amar, his shita was, so that takes us to the end of understanding the Rebbe shita that it's once a year. You learn it out of Gzer Shava from Yamim. Rabbi Neroy Amar, Migaleach Achas L'Shoshim Yom. It's once every 30 days. My timer. Where do I know that from? Because of Kabbat Kaihanim, we learned a couple of days ago that a Kohen Hedyot has to take a haircut how often? Every 30 days. You know why? You shouldn't eat kovet, because otherwise the hair would grow too long. So too we can learn from Kaihanim. Fact is a bomb kasha. How do you know that a Kohen takes a haircut every 30 days? We learn it from Nazir. So we learn from Nazir to Kohen, and then we need Nazir to learn back from Kohen. Learn directly from Nazir. Fact is a gavaltika kasha. My time that Gabe Kahanim dikul kovet vim toimar, but Kahanim atzmam yalfinon mistam Nazir para. Right, that's how we learned. Remember we learned the Gzer Shava from Pera. The Mekilin achas l'shoshim yom, that you lighten up their hair once every 30 days. Vim kain neilaf nazir olam mistam nazir. We learned koyin from stam nazir. Let's learn nazir olam directly from stam nazir. Davish shloshim yom. Yishleimer zaktoisvis v'lei mistaber leililmod kedushas olam and kedushas shah. How could you learn a halacha to kedushas olam and nazir olam from someone who's only a nazir for 30 days? Therefore, we want to learn it from Kohanim. Even though you're learning from Kohanim, which only knows it from another place from Nazir. But Mishum the Kohanim Nami Kedushas Olam Havu. Since Kohanim's Kedushas Olam, it's more appropriate to learn from Kohanim. Beautiful. And now we have the third shita. And that is Rabbi Yosy Omer Megaleach me'erev Shabbos l'erev Shabbos. Correct the Gemara, if Avshalom was cutting his hair every week, and that was his Naziristic restriction, ma'ika b'nei l'shar achui. What would be the difference between him and then his other brothers who were princes? They also took cut their hair once a week, as we learned. Zokt the Toises, in Taimar b'nei ma'ika b'nayu karbonos. The nafkamina is whenever he took a haircut, he had to bring 3 karbonos. Who maybe below they didn't have to bring. The Gemara means to ask, what's the difference in the frequency of cutting hair? You would assume that someone who's a nazir would cut his hair less frequently than a regular person. Clearly it says that it's clearly from the pasuk of mashma that that he was delaying his haircut. Let's have a look at the pasuk. It says in the Galcha is Roshai, clearly his frequency was not as often as the frequency of a regular prince. So, and for the Gemara, you're right, it wasn't that frequent. Look at this. This is unbelievable. Zok the Gemara, I'll tell you the difference. If Yom Tov allowed during the week, his brothers would take a haircut for Yom Tov. His mother said, "Look, you have such long hair. You haven't taken a haircut in 3 days already. What's the matter with you?" Right? Inami legaluche min safra de malashapsa. They were able to take a haircut first thing in the morning on Erev Shabbos. He couldn't take a haircut until the afternoon. So his mother screamed at him, "Oh, slob! You're coming over to Yom Tov al Ungevoksen." Right? Remember the story I said over to tell us? a young man gets married, and he's by his parents. He comes to his parents for the first Pesach, and for Steitzach, the first day Pesach, he gets up. The first night is late, it's a Seder night, so he gets up to go to shul on time, and his mother's up, but his wife, she's a frische Vabele, she's sleeping. What does she have to get up so early for? He's going to shul. His mother's waiting there, and she sees he's wearing his towels, and those towels was pretty stained, and you could see there's like smoke coming out of her ears. My daughter-in-law, what a lazy, good-for-nothing bum. First of all, she's puffing. She should be up. Her husband's going to shul. What's she puffing for? What, she has kids to take care of? She just got married. Not puff for a lazy. I bet you she never cleans. Look, she doesn't clean his towels. She's not embarrassed that she's come to me like this. Who knows? She probably doesn't clean. She doesn't cook. Who knows what about bottling this woman? Oh, she's freaking out. So the son's a little uncomfortable. He goes to shul. He comes back after davening, and then the people are up, and his mother, there's literally smoke coming out of his nose, out of her nose. She's so he realizes it's uncomfortable. So he had to calm the situation down. So he tells his mother, "My dear mama, I know you're looking at my talis. I'm so sorry. We were in such a rush to get her on Erev Pesach. I left my talis at home. So Tati told me, here, take my Shabbos talis. I'll wear my weekday talis." Gewaltig. Sagt die Gemara weiter. Hani Arboim Shana Maya Viditayu. I'm going to need help for this. Hani Arboim Shana Maya Viditayu. The pasuk says that after 40 years, Vayimikei Arboim Shana, that's when Avshalom said he's going to go. This really heralded the beginning of the rebellion of Avshalom. Avshalom's rebellion began after 40 years. Correct, more 40 years from when? Arboim Shana Maya Viditayu. Where are these 40 years from? Rav Noiroi Omer, Mishum Rav Yeshua, Lekates Mem Shana, it was 40 years from which point? Sheshalu Lahen Melech. When Klal Yisrael were Chaytei, and they demanded of Shmuel Hanavi a king. Tana we learned, Oysa Shana, Sheshalu Lahen Melech, Hishnas Eser L'Shmuel, Haramasi. It was the 10th year that Shmuel was leading them, and when he was leading them for 10 years, they asked for a king, and then 30 years later, which would have been 30 years after Shaul was established, 30 years after Shaul was established, I'm sorry, it would be 40 years after Shaul, 40 years after Shaul was established, which is 50 years after Shmuel became Navi, this story happened. What is the relevance? So let's see Tosfos.
Shaul was only a melech for 2 years.
Right, 2.5 years it says.
Right.
The Tosfos are going to go through the cheshbon. I'm happy you know that because I'm totally confused. I was hoping someone will help me with this Tosfos. So let's learn this Tosfos and you'll help us get it clear. Hani mem shana lamai. Pirish the leka lemeimar lemem shana lemalchus based up. Avshalom's rebellion couldn't have been 40 years after David HaMelech already became king. The Oz married Avshalom. That's first when Avshalom was married. The mashma kroi, mashma from the pasuk, the Haya Melech, that David HaMelech was still the king. Hey shanim acher ma'aseh, 5 years after Avshalom did this rebellion. I think that's what it means. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Gimel shel rov, there were 3 years of hunger, and then v'echad shemana Yisrael, and 1 year where he counted Klal Yisrael. The echad shehemed mishmaris, when he set up mishmaris. I don't even know what this mishmaris are. But David HaMelech didn't have the Beis HaMikdash. What mishmaris did he set up? It was a Mishkan? So he set up mishmaris. So for 5 years after the beginning of Avshalom's rebellion, okay. So for the 5 years after Avshalom's rebellion, David was still king. So therefore, you cannot say that this happened after 40 years because David was not king for 40 years. Umeshani miketz mem shana. Umeshani miketz mem shana shesholo melech. Means elu shemardu b'malchus shalolam. Klal Yisrael was murdered in the malchus of the Rebbeinu Shalom by asking for a king. So Tosfos is telling us Tola Meridus of Shalom b'sheilosam lahamelech. So Ki'ilu is like as a punishment. You were murdered in the Rebbeinu Shalom by asking for a melech. Now Avshalom is going to be murdered against the melech that you asked for. I believe that's what the Tosfos is telling us. That the Torah is creating a link. The Navi is telling us that the Merida of Avshalom is connected to what Klal Yisrael was murdered by asking for the king. Shahaya Shnas Eshel Shmuel, it was the 10th year of Shmuel's rule. Ubechatzi Yud Aleph, in the middle of Shmuel's 11th year, Hamid Melech, that's when Shmuel set up Shol. Umolach Chatzi Yud Aleph, Shol was the king for half of the 11th year. Ubei Shonim, the 12th year and the 13th year. Harei Dalet Shonim L'Sheila. So that would make it the 4th year from when they asked. So in Shmuel's 10th year, he was asked 10, 11, 12, 13. So the 4th year that he was asked, that's when David HaMelech came into play. Ubetchilas Lamed Vav L'Malchus Beis David, the beginning of the 36th year that Melech Beis David was established, Hishnas Mem L'Shelo, that would work out 40 years from the time that Klal Yisrael asked for a king. The Achigach Morid of Shalom, at that point of Shalom rebelled. The year that Avshalom rebelled was a year of hunger. The Gam Oisa Shnas Mem L'Shaila. It was also the 40th year of when they originally had asked for a king. Even if the Merida happened at the beginning of the 40th year, even though the pasuk says Miketz Mem Shana, it's Lavdavka because could be it was at the beginning of the year. Okay, gewaltig. Sagt der Heilige Mishnah weiter.
I don't understand why it's called they were married, because they knew they were supposed to have a king. There's a pasuk that says when they counted all the malachim of Esav, right? There's a little line right after that says they had all these kings before the Bnei Israel had a king, right? So anyone who's reading that from the time of Yeshua knew that there's supposed to be a melech.
So maybe there's supposed to be a melech, but it shouldn't be you.
It shouldn't be what?
I remember when I'm sorry. What did Shlomo say? You mean it's right that they should have a melech, but it wasn't right the way they asked that they wanted to be like every other nation. So that's what Shlomo saying. The Avla was they wanted to be like every other nation. I remember when I was in Philadelphia Yeshiva. So what happened is Rav Mendel Kaplan Zatzal died the day before Erev Pesach when we were in his class. We finished him up, and because of that, they couldn't get another Rebbe that quickly right after Pesach. So they just bumped us up to Reb Shmuel Kamenetsky's year. And the next year, there was an Ibriyar. So like we really had an overdose. We OD'd on Reb Shmuel Kamenetsky's year. So what happened was towards the end of the year, one of the Bachim in my class decided that he wants to be able to ask in cheer because no one would ask in cheer. No one hacked in cheer. It was not ever done. And he wanted to start hacking in cheer because he was like getting bored already. He wanted to hack in cheer. So we asked Revelia, is it appropriate for us to hack into shear during a Shmuel shear? So Revelia said, Erster Bocher was tutos is a Grecian Chutchev, noch dem Megmin Shein. So that was his key. He went and did it. So it could get done, but don't be the one to do it. He was an option. Yeah. Okay. He was very happy to take that title. Let's talk to him more. Stam Naziris Lamajoin.
With Shmuel and Revelia were competition to each other.
It wasn't really competition. They complemented each other. Stam Naziris Lamajoin. If someone just says Irani Nazir, it means Naziris for 30 days. Minanamili. Where do we know this from? Amr of Masna, Amr Kra. It says by a Nazir, Kadosh Yeh Gadal Peroishoy. So Yeh is Gematria 30. Yeh be Gematria Tlosan Hapi. See, the Gemara says Gematrias. The Gemara is basing Stam Naziris Lamajoin on a Gematria. Bar Pada said, Keneged Nazir and this Nazir Nizrei Ha'amur B'Torah. Alamed Chasar Achas. You know how long Stam Nazir is? It's not 30 days, it's 29 days. Because if you count up all the times in the Parsha of Nazir, where it mentions the word Nazir or Yazir or a similar word, it's 29 times. Tosus on Amud Beis is going to ask 30 times, so he explains why the additional time doesn't count. Correct the Gemara. Rab Masna Nami Nela if Nazir in Israel. Parpada is a good ha'ara. He has a very good ha'ara. count up the amount of times, you'll see 29. Why doesn't Rav Masna agree with that method? Amalach, because some of the words Nazir, Yazir are needed to make Lamuda. So you don't have anymore all 29 extra. So once you don't have all 29 extra, because you needed it to use some, that's no longer a valid method. Hahula drasha, and we get the chazer what we've already learned. Miyayin v'shecha yazir was lesser yayin mitzvah kiyayin harishus, right? We chazer that from yesterday's daf. And kiyafli linder neder nader lahazir malamich and naziris chol al naziris, that one naziris is chal on another naziris. And we're going to see in a minute what that means. I'm just going to look at the Toisus, which carries over on Tamid Beis. It says 29 times Parshas Nazir. Uchenegdam Moishech Stam Naziris, and that's how long a Stam Naziris stretches. Chav Tes Yoim, 29 days. Afal Gavde Timsa Shloishim Kishata Yoid Liminyanom. For Toisus, if you actually go and count, you'll find 30 times. The shleimer that one of them doesn't count, because it says Nazir Elikav Roishoy Lo Yavim Minyana, because that doesn't mean Naziris. That means Nazir Elikav, the crown of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, the Lashon Kezer Kedemetagaminon Kalila. Hanul Drasha. Weißt du was? That's the Chassidus is the way to go. Hanul Drasha, the Chivin the Atzin the Drasha, since they're for a Drasha, Loy Matztarfin and Leminyana, the ones that we learn a Drasha out of can no longer count as a tally. So therefore, we cannot count 29 because we're missing. So one of them, what do we learn from? Minayin shenaziris chal al naziris. So this is a very important. Naziris isn't stam chal al naziris. Vada nira, the mamar hareini nazir vin nazir lo yitra. That's pashut. I want to accept it for myself. 2 consecutive naziris. I don't need a pasuk to tell me that works. The mishtame shapir kishayashlam nazirus hayarishon the maskulumayna nazir shaynim. When I finish my first naziris, I want to go to the second naziris. That's not what we need a pasuk for. We need a pasuk when it sounds like I'm trying to create 2 concurrent naziris. And what did I say? The Rebbe Kiva Eger in the Gil Nishas tells us how to read this. You see, in Nazir, Rebbe Kiva Eger's got to get into the Girsha business too. You can't just do the Tzarechins. Tzarech Leimer ben Nazir Hayoim. So if he said Hareini Nazir Hayoim ben Nazir Hayoim, so he's clearly saying he wants 2 concurrent Nazirisin. It doesn't work. The Havel without the pasuk, the chiddush of the pasuk, the extra pasuk, we should have said Lo Chayla Elachad Naziris. Keeping them Hayoim, he wants them both to be chal today. And he will still have to keep 2 consecutive Naziris. Zog the Gemara, so let's go weiter. So Zog the Gemara, what's Bar Pada going to do? He doesn't have 29 words, Nazir, free and clear. Some of them being used. Zog Bar Pada, I take the opposite approach. Lekachad min hain, the lavel drush. There's got to be at least one of these words that you're not going to have a drasha for. So since we're going to have to say one is leminyana, it teaches us that even though you made drashas from the others, you can count them for the minyan. 1, 10, as many as there are, but some of them for sure you're not going to have a special drasha for. So therefore we can conclude midahu leminyana, therefore kula leminyana. When he ikabahu drasha, even though some of them have a drasha, because of the ones that don't have a drasha. Okay, so we have a machlokes, is Naziris 29 days or is Naziris 30 days? Tanan, we learn. That's right. And when you could stop, when you could stop fearing Zechut Naziris. That's right. So Tanan we learn. Stam Naziris Shloshim Yoim. Standard Naziris Shloshim Yoim. This puts Bar Pada on the ropes because Bishlam of Mas Nanicha. Because that's exactly what it says. El Bar Pada Kasha. Amalach Bar Pada, Zok Bar Pada, before you write me off, I can answer you. I did the Ika Yoim Tolson, the Megaleach, or maybe Karbonoisa, since day 30, where he has to do his process to discharge his Naziris, and Tosfos adds, up until the time during the day where he finishes this whole process, he's still not allowed to drink wine. He still can't be tamei. So even though it's not part of the minyan naziris, but his restrictions are still there, that's why he calls it 30. Tanan we learned. Misha Amar Hareini Nazir Migaleach Yom Shloishim Ve'echad. This is a lot more explicit. It's much more of a taina. Amar Pada. Why all of the process happens on the 31st day? Because the Naziris is 30 days. Ela Bar Pada kosher. But it's going to be shver according to Bar Pada. Why would you need to do the Migaleach on 31? Do it on day 30. Amalach Bar Pada, Ema Seifa. Before you write me off, why don't you read the next part of the Mishnah, and you're going to find out maybe not only is it not a kash on me, maybe in fact it's a riot to me. It says in the Seifa, Im Gilach Liyom Shloishim, if you did do the process on the 30th day, Yotza, you're Yotza. So we have to know, why isn't it Lechatchila? Why is it Im Gilach? According to Bar Pada, Lechatchila, you should be able to do the process on day 30. And we'll get there in a second. But it's for sure a huge problem for a Masna. Because for a Masna, if you make Giluch on day 30, you did it too early. Ela Seifa Misayalet. From the Seifa, you have a right to Bar Pada. And Reisha, why does the Reisha say Lechatchila, you're supposed to be Megaleach on day 31, even though you should really be able to be Megaleach on day 30? Because Tam Nazir is 29 days. It's Nasaka Eimer Shleimin. And Tosfos explains, since it's pretty common for someone to say Hareini Nazir for 30 days, that's a pretty common thing to do, that wouldn't be Stam Naziris anymore. That would be a 30-day Naziris because he speaks out 30 days, right? So therefore, we make him wait to day 31, even when he said Hareini Nazir Stam, because we don't want people to get confused between Hareini Nazir Stam and Hareini Nazir Shloshim Yom. So since when he says Hareini Nazir Shloshim Yom, for sure the Giluach, the whole process to discharge the Naziris happens on day 31. So therefore, al takzeir derbanan l'chatchila, we say that you should make the discharge for our Stam Naziris also on day 31. But avada b'di'eved, if you did it on day 30, it would be adequate. But it would Rab Mashna cost your sefer. But according to Rab Mashna, it's very schwer because I'm sorry. If he says 30 days, then Ikra Adin, he has to do the Giluch on day 31. Not if he said 30 days by Stam. That's right. Oh, thank you for clarifying that. Yeah, of course, if he said 30 days, he could only do it on day 31, the discharge ceremony. But if he said 29, if he said Stam, which would only mean 29 days, then he could. What's not true? We're gonna get to that. No, he did not say shleimin because we're gonna soon see Bar Pada holds that you don't say mixes hayom kakulai. So we're gonna have to get to the shleimin. Tosfos is going to discuss that. So I didn't focus on that, but we're gonna have to explain that. So you're bringing up a very good point. Chaim's asking. It says not zakoyim shleimim. Why do you have to say shleimim? It should be not zakoyim or 30 days. What's up a shleimim? So that's something we're gonna have to answer. Well, Rav Masna kosher sefer. According to Rav Masna, the sefer is fair. Because the Sefer says that you could, if you're Megaleich on day 30, it'll be good enough. How could you be Megaleich on day 30 if it's still in the middle of your Naziris? Zok Gemara, Rav Masna holds, Kasavar mixes Hayom Kakulai. Rav Masna holds, mixes Hayom Kakulai. So therefore, since I was able to keep Naziris for part of day 30, that's good enough. L'chatchila, you should wait, and you shouldn't terminate your Naziris till the next day. But with the Evet, since he holds mixes Hayom Kakulai, it will be a good giluach, and it will work. Let's see the aleph and the bach. And I'll prove it to you. But we learned Hareini Nazir Shloishim Yom. If someone says I'm a Nazir for Shloishim Yom, there for sure it's 30 days, right? Im Gilach Yom Shloishim Lo Yotza, he won't be Yotza. So it's a kasha. You see over here it doesn't work. That's when he said Shloishim Yom Shleimin. If you say Shloshim Yom Shleimim, then you don't say Miksay Yom Kakulai. But if you say Shloshim Yom, you say Miksay Yom Kakulai. So let's just do a quick inventory, and then we'll focus on the Miksay Yom Kakulai. Bar Pada says that Stam Naziris is 29 days. Nevertheless, since many people are Makabal Naziris for 30 days, even if you did Naziris of 29 days, you should keep your Naziris for 30 days and only do the Giluach on day 31. However, if you did it on day 30, in the case of Stam Naziris, of course it's good, because your Naziris ended at the end of day 29. Rav Masna, on the other hand, holds that the Stam Naziris is 30, but he holds Miksay Yom Kakulai. So there's not such a big difference anymore between Bar Pada and Rav Masna, because they both hold that you could be Melech on day 30. The difference is Bar Pada holds you could be Melech on day 30 first thing in the morning, Lechatchila, and Rav Masna says you can do it later in the day once you have Mitzvah Yom Kuloi, because you shouldn't be Samich on Mitzvah Yom Kuloi. So that's the machlokes. The problem is the Gemara said according to Bar Pada, the reason why you shouldn't be Megaleich by Stam Naziris on day 30 is because of someone who said Shleiman. What does Shleiman have to do with this? If Bar Pada would hold Mitzvah Hayom Kakuloi, then I understand only if he said 30 Shleiman does he have to be Megalech on day 31. But if he holds of Mitzvah Hayom Kakuloi, right? If he holds of Mitzvah Kakuloi, he has to say Shleiman. But if he doesn't hold of Mitzvah Hayom Kakuloi, even if he said 30 days, he has to be Megalech on day 31 because he doesn't hold of Mitzvah Hayom Kakuloi. You only need to speak out Shleiman if you hold Mitzvah Yom Kakuloi. And Bar Pada does not hold Mitzvah Yom Kakuloi. So that is a problem that we have to deal with. So let's see Taishus. He explains it beautifully. Amalach Bar Pada, Eber Seifa. V'mgilach b'yom shloshim yotza, el Seifa Mesayele, v'reisha. They call Amar lechatchila. It's good to get these little corrections here. V'reisha, they call Amar lechatchila, shloshim ve'echad. The reisha said lechatchila, you should be Megaleich on day 31, not on day 30, is Ke'omer, it's as if he said Shloshim Yom Shleiman. So now he didn't say it, but it's as if he said Shloshim Yom Shleiman. Liyash Nazir. Zokte Taishus, let's see the Tezayin again. The after Legalech B'Yom Shloshim. There he can no longer be Megalech B'Yom Shloshim, because it's as if he said Yom Shloshim Shleiman. Therefore, since if he spoke out Shloshim, he has to wait for day 31. Even if he didn't speak out Shloshim, he made a Stam Naziris, the Gazur Chachamim, Kisha Aimer Nazir Stam, the Lechatchila, Lo Yigaleach, Ela B'Yom Shloshim V'echad. Even if he said Nazir Stam, which really only means 29 days, he should still wait the extra day to make the Geluach. Why? Because it's common for someone to say 30 days. Aval B'Di'evet, but Avada B'Di'evet, Im Gilach B'Yom Lamed, Yotza, Shekain Dine Deiraisa, because that in fact is halacha. The Stam Nazir Legalech B'Yom Shloshim. A regular Nazir is only 29 days, and the Giluach will be on day 30. Frek Toshis a Gavalta Kasha. Vim Tomer, Amai Yitzrach Lememar Gzeira Otu Heichad Amar Shleiman. Why is the Gzeira only Otu Heichad if I said 30 complete days? Lema Gzeira Otu Heichad Amar Shloshim Yom Beloy Shleiman. Because we know that Bar Pada does not hold the Mitzvah Hayom Kakuloi. So 30 days by definition means 30 complete days. It's clear from the second kasha that we learned the Bar Pada, the less lay mixes a Yom Kakuloi, according to Bar Pada, who doesn't hold of this rule of mixes a Yom Kakuloi, Ki Amar Shloishim, when he said 30 days, the Midei Raisa Tzarech Legalech B'Yom Lamed Ve'echad. He has to do the Geluch on day 31, because 30 days means 30 complete days, and there is no mixes a Yom Kakuloi. So the question is, why did the Gemara need to say that he said Shloshim Shleimim according to Bar Pada? The Shleimim Doctors, the Mishum Deshani Lekamon, the terrorists might be a little disappointment. The Mishum Deshani Lekamon, we said later on, explaining Rab Masna, Ka'aymer Shleimim, right? We said at the end, the brisa that says that Mgilach Yom Shloshim Lo Yotza, I Rab Masna holds Mitzvah Yom Kakuloi. So the Gemara answered, Be'omer Shleimim, right? And there's a shot if it's Be'omer or if it's Ke'omer. Did he actually have to speak it out? Or if he said it, but whatever it is, since in Rav Nachman the final word was Be'omer Shleimim, but in Rav Masna we didn't have a choice because he holds Mitzvah Yom Kakuloi. So in order to say Lo Yotza, it has to be when the Noider spoke out Shleimim. Dashma Inon. Kisha Omar, the Kisha Omar, Loshem Yusser, Lamed Joim, since he said an extra Loshem Yamid Loim, Ki'ilu Amar Shleimim. So now Toshis opened up our eyes to a new thing. According to Rav Masna, if you said Shareini Nazir Shloshim Yom, you don't have to speak out Shleimim. Because Stav Naziris is 30 days. So why did you say 30 days? According to Bar Pada, if I say Shareini Nazir 30 days, you needed to say speak out 30 days. Because otherwise it would only be 29 days. But according to Rav Masna, where every stam naziris by default is 30 days, if someone spoke it already knows it's 30 days, he must mean to say that I don't want to rely on mixes yom kakuloi, I want 30 full days. The loyamina bazeh, the loyamina bazeh mixes yom kakuloi, because according to Rav Masna, by speaking of 30 days shows that he does not want mixes yom kakuloi. The itzrach the aimer shleimim, or it's ke aimer shleimim. So kamashani nami ba'alish to the barpada. So since we use shleimim by Rav Masna, we use it by barpada. But avada, according to barpada, by definition, every day you don't say mixed yom kakuloi. Okay, we'll stop here. The Gemara is going to go back to in the Shaila. I just want to bring up, and even though according to barpada you don't say mixed yom kakuloi, that's of course only the last day of Naziris. The first day of Naziris, avada you say mixed yom kakuloi, because lav dafka is someone being makabel Naziris at the beginning of the day. Any day where you're being makabel Naziris, that counts as the full day one, right? So you always say mixed yom kakuloi on the first day, not on the last day. The Gemara tomorrow is going to discuss what if the first day and the last day is the same day, meaning you had two back-to-back Naziris. Could that day count for both? So that's what the Gemara is going to discuss in Mitzvah tomorrow. Okay, shkoyach. Oh, Eddie, welcome back. Nice to see you.
Thank you. Pleasure to be back.
You picked a good Masechta. Rabbi Lowy spoke today, and he told us that we have this thing that the three hardest Masechtas are Oni, which stands for Erevin, Nida, and Yavamis. Rabbi Lowy said today, no, that's not what it is. It's Erevin, Nazir, and Yavamis. And I'm told that it's going to be a very hard Masechta. So we'll all work through this together. Oh, tomorrow the second shiur, which is normally at 9, is going to be pushed off because at 9 o'clock there's a siyum on Maseches Nadarim for the whole shul. So it's 7 o'clock is the early shiur, and the 9 o'clock shiur, I mean, it'll be after the siyum. So I guess whoever's at the siyum, it'll be after siyum. And what I'll do is for people who aren't going to make the shul, I'll WhatsApp. I'll send out a WhatsApp when a couple of minutes before we start. Yes.